board email. That has been included in the notice. I'll also go ahead and send it on the text here. Board at Wabash board. Right. Ray, I know Jennifer wanted to move the perf presentation due to too close to the beginning. Is there any, like, is it possible to change the agenda order just to go through that first and then go back to public comments and reading the approval of the previous meetings, just amending the agenda?
Yeah, that's
I'm assuming that requires a short vote.
Yep.
All right. So I move agenda item number 5, specifically the perf component, forward. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any opposition? All right. So we can go ahead to perf components, starting there. So we'll just go on to fire district component. So I believe that's Don Meyer. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll mute myself.
Okay. What Jennifer had reached out to me for assistance in determining the ability to participate in the 1977 fund for the firefighters. I put together some bullet points that I sent on to Jennifer, and I believe went to each of the 3 board members as well as some information, the member handbook on the 1977 fund, as well as resolutions that deal with it. I'm happy to walk through it, but I would suggest that if the board or the trustee have questions, stop me at any time. But it's my understanding that you're not a volunteer fire department anymore, but you're going to where you will be hiring firemen, or you have, and you're looking to come up with benefit programs and the like, not only compensation, but benefits. And one of the benefit programs that's offered through the state of Indiana is called the 1977 Fund. And the 1977 Fund is also part of PERF, PERF Public Employee Retirement Fund. But it's one that is specific for police and firefighters. Now, they're relative to it, I don't know how much you understand of it, but it's a qualified retirement plan where the participants not taxed on the monies until they come out to them. Monies are put in on their behalf, but they're not taxed until later. Whatever's earned on it is not taxed until it's distributed. So that's the benefit of any qualified plan that you've got out here. If there's anybody that works for for-profit enterprises, they have the same ability to do that. Now, that being said, the plans that you have with PERF and as well as like the teacher retirement plan, TURF, they all are under the Indiana Public Retirement System. You'll see it in PERS. The 1977 fund, as well as the other funds that INPERS administers, have 2 components. They have a component which they call a defined benefit component, and that is that the individual is entitled to a benefit defined up front that the employer then funds to get to it, such as I would say I would be entitled to receive 52% of my salary per month, monthly salary per month for life. That's a defined benefit. And so the participating employer would fund to provide that defined benefit. But there's also what's called a defined contribution feature of it. And that is where you put in a defined contribution up front of a specific amount, a percentage. In this case, 6% of their salary goes in, and whatever that amount grows to, that's what they're entitled to in the future. And that's the more common that we see out here in public as well as private enterprise, where we have it over here. They just put the money in, and whatever it grows to, that's what you get. Now, that being said, there are vesting requirements that apply with respect to the 1977 fund on its defined benefit. But there aren't, it's 100% vested on the defined contribution piece. So let me kind of slow down here for a second to say that you don't have to participate in the 1977 fund. But if you do, the township itself, the township board, agrees in a resolution that they will in fact participate in it. And once you're in, it's difficult to get back out. But that's not anything unusual for many other of these Indiana pension funds that are out here. And what you agree to contribute is an amount equal to 19.7% of their salary. And that's per year. And then they also have an obligation to put in another 6%, which, if the township were so inclined, the township could put in for them as well. So there's 25.7% going into this plan every year. Now, I'll throw this in at this point. If you're trying to get yourself a firefighting force, you have to, in fact, be able to compete with others that are in the community, not only on compensation, but also on the benefits that are offered. And there are a number of firefighting units that are covered by this 1977 fund. You can find all kinds of information on the NPERS site, but there's probably close to a couple of hundred units that currently are covered by the 1977 fund. So I believe that I sent on to you that you've got a copy of that resolution should you desire to, in fact, participate in the 77 fund. I said that it's elective. You don't have to. There are other options that are available out here. There's another one that the state of Indiana through the auditor's office provides, which is called Hoosier Start. And it is a program that is allowed under a different Internal Revenue Code provision. But what that one is that it's more along the lines of, and again, I don't know if the board is in any 401k plans, but it's comparable to it. It's not a 401k because governmental entities can't be in a 401k, a cash or deferred arrangement, but it's a 457B. And what that provides is that an employee can elect to say, don't pay me this in compensation, but instead contribute it to the plan on my behalf. The employee is not subject to income tax on the amounts that they have put in there. It grows tax deferred, and then when they pull the money back out of the Hoosier Start Fund, that's when they're taxed. So that's an option that you have as well. And then you could actually individually design a plan if you wanted as well. I'm sure that there are some firefighting organizations around the state that do that. But I would come back with, you have to do what would be competitive on the benefits and comp that you wish to offer to these people to get them to join you. Let me at this point, I mean, I can go on relative to it, but let me say, do you have questions on what these options are and what they mean? And I'll pose it to the board and the trustees.
To me, it appears to be similar in nature to, for example, a 403B plan. Obviously, like there's additional components, but it's very similar in nature to that, where there's an amount that's being taken.
The 457, the Hoosier Start one is, but the 403B is only available to non-governmental tax exempt organizations and public schools. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the 457B absolutely is comparable to a 403B tax sheltered annuity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please go ahead, please. No. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just saying, so it's very similar in that regard. And also like when it comes to like the cost structure, right? So like there's an amount that the township is putting in, there's an amount that the firefighter themselves can put in, and that accrues over time. And then when they retire or they start taking out money, then it's taxed over at that moment.
That's correct. And,
Right.
and the 1977 fund, though you don't have the ability as an employee to decide, do I put in the 6% or not? But the 6% part of the 1977 fund works similar to the 403B and the 457, because whatever that 6% grows to, that's what you get paid in the future. But the 77 fund has what I like to call the old time pension benefit, the defined benefit that you would see out here, that, you're going to get this annuity for your life. So there's two parts to the 77 fund.
Okay.
Okay.
Brendan, Michelle, do either of you have any questions?
I do not at this point, but I would ask Don, would there be an email that could be provided where I would be able to forward or perhaps field and then forward some questions along?
Yes, absolutely. I can provide it here. If you got a pencil, Brendan.
Yes, sir.
It's DMEYER, my first initial and last name, at BOSELAW.com, boslaw.com.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Angel, can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So with regard to the 457B, just to get information out there, is there like a contribution limit, like a 401k, an individual contribution limit?
Yes, there is, Ray. It works very much the same now. The unique part of it is it has some slightly differences, but in general, if you could put in up to 19,500 plus another 6,500 if you're 50 or over. Now, I don't know that you guys necessarily want to hire 50-year-old firefighters other than maybe a chief, but yes, Ray, it has similar limits.
Okay.
Except for when you get down to your last 3 years of employment, you can actually double the 19,500 amount.
Okay, and then is there the same testing that would be done?
No.
So, okay,
No.
great.
No, because you guys are a governmental entity, we get rid of that testing. And I'm assuming, Ray, that you must work for a public company, so you have to worry about the testing.
I own one.
So, then you know absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the governmental entity, no, that ADP, the deferral percentage testing does not apply.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I do have a question. I don't know if this would be for, I suppose, the trustee at this juncture. What was the amount of money that we built into the emergency loan for this program or these programs?
It's not defined. The entire loan is, it's not broken down in that way. And we can talk to Reedy Financial about that as well.
I do have a question on the 77 plan.
Generally, we would wait until a little bit later. Is that correct, Ray? Sorry, not trying to, or is there like just trying to figure out that we do this right?
Yeah. So Mike, your question could come in the public comment section. So the questions right now are reserved for the board and the trustee to Don. But if you wanted to make a public comment and have us consider a question, we'd be happy to do so.
Can I do that
I'm
now?
going to interject here. I'm going to interject here actually and make this real easy. I'm going to go ahead and cede my time on this floor as the secretary to our former chief, Mike Francis, who I do think has some basis of competency in this area and could bring actually some area of expertise. Mike, please go ahead and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of issues that haven't been discussed on the 77 plan. Is do our current firefighters can even pass the physical that will be given to them? And it's not an automatic give me that the firefighters will be able to get on the 77 plan, because it's a psychological and physical test. And there's quite a bit of time and effort. There's a pension board that needs to be established. And there's also physicals, both physical and a mental test. And there's also cost to the township and the citizens that have to pay for those tests. So that has not been discussed here. And that is something that will cost a lots of money. And we're not even sure that the current employees can get on that. So that's some considerations you guys need to know. And who's going to be on
I
the
appreciate that
pension
very
board?
much. Well, I think that's a great item for discussion and something that this board and the trustee and the firefighters will consider. So with that in mind, I've certainly made note of that for my own personal notes, Mike, but that will be in our minutes then as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And sorry to interject, Mike. I'm just trying to keep the flow and make sure that we do it parliamentary correct. You know, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm all about
Thank
it.
you.
Yes, please.
All right. Are there any other questions? I know that the trustee also has an opportunity to ask questions. Does the trustee have any questions? I don't think I have any more, or Brendan or
do not.
myself. Okay. Yep. So I want to say thank you for presentation. And as you said, you had your email. I assume this will be an ongoing process either way as we try to figure out what the ins and outs of it are. So yeah.
So yeah, just the trustee and the board, I mean, you guys send me whatever questions and I'll respond back to you by the email or whatever, however's best, most efficient for you. And Ray, the same with you as well. Just let me know. But otherwise, I'm gonna hang up, leave the meeting then, unless you guys need me for anything further.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it, Don. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
you guys have a nice evening. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Don. Take care.
And while we're on in the subject, it's my understanding that when we hired different firefighters, the part of what the compensation that was included in the package was that there would be perf benefits. Is that correct? I guess it's a question to the trustee.
Yes, we said that we would provide retirement benefits.
Okay. And yeah, and up to this point, we haven't set it up, but you know, it's good that we're starting to move in that direction, albeit a little bit late, but we can still make up time for it. So yeah. Anyway, so let's go through that. That was the part 5B of the agenda. Since we can go back to the beginning and go through fire to public comments and then go back to the fire district hiring of the fire chief and current staff in normal order. I just wanted to make sure I understand that the lawyer was there was a time constraint and whatnot, and we wanted to make sure that we had the best use of his time. So going back to the public comment and communication, given the length of the meeting, if possible, we're going to try and limit it to 5 to 10 minutes, and then any additional public comments can also be sent to our email, and those will be included on the record as well. Is that acceptable, legally speaking, Ray? Well, we're just using counsel since we have it, so.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yep.
All right, so we'll spend the next 10 minutes up to 6:35 on it. So the floor is open. Given that it's a little bit difficult, if people could speak first and I'll recognize them. Is there anybody in particular that has a public comment that is either germane to any of the issues that we're discussing? Let me pull up the email here that has the information on specifically what those 4 areas of public comment are. And those are, let me see here. Ray, actually, could you read those? I know you had them up. I can't spot them here.
Yeah, just a moment. I actually got, okay. So public comment at this time is limited to taxpayers that reside within the township that have a question about an estimate of expenditures, a proposed levy of taxes, the approval of the executive's annual report, or any matter which is on the agenda for today.
And that's, by the way, my understanding for any public meeting, correct? There has to be a resident of the township for
That's
it to be okay, cool. All right, any opening the floor up to any public comments? Give it a second. I know Zoom is ridiculous, so. We'll give another opportunity. Is there any public comment?
Yes.
All right. All right, Clinton. I'm assuming you're a resident of the township?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
2319 Temple Court. I just my question is, and I guess we'll probably get to it, and there might be an answer later in the meeting. With the current pending wrongful termination lawsuit, what is the township's goals moving forward with the new chief staffing?
Ray, do you want to?
Yeah, so at this time, the township's been directed by council that there is no comment at this time. To the extent facts continue to evolve, that will be discussed at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there any other additional public comment, especially like again, anything related to the estimate of expenditures, proposed levy of taxes, approval of the executive's annual report, or any other matter being considered by the legislative body? Jamie, I think I see your hand raised.
Hi, yes. So I've shared an email with Ms. Tacing asking her about fundages that have been spent and including about specifically this year because it's my understanding that really no assistance was given in the 2020 year. So I'm interested in your response, Ms. Tacing. You mentioned that there was $78,000 that was given out in 2020. And I was wondering if you could explain how that assistance was reported.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, how do we prefer to do that? Do we want to ask, have the opportunity for them for Ms. Tacing to respond now? Do we want to cover it specifically in the annual report component? Ray, what would be the best way to do that?
I'd recommend covering it in the annual report, but thank you for your comment.
Yeah, we'll make sure that is addressed, Jamie. I'll go in the record saying that that's a concern of mine as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other public comment? I'm gonna scroll through the pages in case anybody's raising their hands because there's 60 plus people here. It's hard to keep track of all of them. All right. Yes, I don't see any hands raised, but I'll make sure if anybody has a public comment we have a couple more minutes here, please go ahead and unmute yourself and I'll recognize you. Right. I think we can go ahead and I don't see any any additional public. Oh, I see a question here that we can address later, specifically the how much is the township spending on legal counsel? I know that we have a segment on that specifically later on because and we'll make sure to discuss that as well as what possible if there's any changes that will be required of that and stuff like that, we can cover that a little bit later as well. So let's go ahead here. Let's see, let me skip back to the agenda. I'm just trying to keep track of all of this. So a reminder again, if there is any additional public comment, you can actually go ahead and send it to the email. I'll send that again here real quick. We'll make sure to include that. Our standard modus operandi is to allow a couple of hours after to have people also like provide public comment and whatnot, just because we know it's a little bit difficult in the current COVID situation, and I know it's not accessible for everybody, so we'll make sure to keep doing that. All right. So moving on to the next component, approval of the minutes from the January 5th meeting of the Wabash Township Advisory Board. I'll leave it to Brendan Betts, who's our secretary, to read those minutes.
Sure. The meeting on January 5th, 2021 opened at 6:02 in the evening. We did the Pledge of Allegiance. We then had our reorganization nomination. During this time, I nominated now President Angel Valentin to be chair of the board, Board member Whitebrock seconded the nomination. Now Board President Valentin accepted the nomination and became chair. I went over and reviewed the minutes from our December 15th meeting in 2020, which was the most previous to that date. There was no comment, so I moved to adopt the minutes. Board member Whitebrock seconded the motion, and the motion carried unanimously. We discussed meeting dates for the year 2021. We talked about, shooting for the third Tuesday of every month. We noted that starting in January 19th, clearly that was pushed back. February 16th was noted as the next date. March 16th was noted as the next date. April 20th, the following meeting. May 18th, then June 15th, July 20th, August 17th, September 21st, October 19th, November 16th, and December 21st. These are tentative dates, but we have put them on our calendars. We then had public comment. Seeing as there was none, I moved to close the meeting. Member Whitebrock seconded the motion, which carried unanimously, and we closed that meeting at 6:28 in the evening.
All right. So I move that we accept the minutes. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Any opposition, Mr. Secretary?
No, sir.
All right. So hearing no opposition, the minutes are approved unanimously. The meeting minutes for the January 5th meeting are approved unanimously. So we will move on to item 5A of the agenda, which was the hiring of the fire chief and current staffing. I imagine that would be Trustee Tyson. So the opportunity there. I'll mute myself.
So I have prepared a state of Wabash Township for the year 2020. In summary, Wabash Township has been able to expand assistance to our residents in need through this pandemic with assistance from state and federal aid. We've also continued the long-term project of moving from a 95% volunteer to 75% volunteer fire and emergency service provider, with the addition of 2 new paid fire personnel, as well as health insurance for all full-time employees. For our township assistance, Wabash Township continues to focus on helping our residents in need. In 2019, we were able to more than double direct township assistance from $16,416 in 2018 to $37,282 in 2019. In 2020, new sources of aid were.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that you jumped over to the next one. We can go ahead and continue there. We were talking about the hiring of the chief and the current staffing, but it's okay. You can continue, then we can go jump back.
Yeah, so I don't think that will make sense without what I've prepared for you in this statement. So hopefully some of this information will help us with that conversation. This is the state of the whole township. So this is for 2020. In 2020, I'll start over a little bit. In 2020, new sources of aid were made available by the state and federal government to our residents due to the COVID emergency. Therefore, in accordance with our township assistance guidelines, we referred our residents to those new sources of funding. They include the Indiana State Rental Assistance Program, Bauer Family Fund, United Way, COVID Housing Hotline, and Area 4 Utility Assistance Program, as well as our usual county resources, including Salvation Army, Mary T. Clinker Veterans Resource Center, Lafayette Urban Ministries, and Lafayette Transitional Housing. Through these referrals, we estimate we were able to help 108 residents with an estimated value of $78,000, double what we were able to do directly in 2019. In addition, we looked for new opportunities to assist our residents. These include assisting with the execution of the Indiana State Rental Assistance Program and meeting with Patty Useem from LUM regarding their interest in using our space for West Lafayette Food Pantry. We remain open to future discussions on how we can best serve the township. With the anticipated end of the eviction moratorium later in 2021, we will continue to work with other agencies to leverage our existing funds as much as possible and seek additional guidance from the Wabash Township Board. Fire and emergency services. In 2019, the board approved an emergency loan to meet the fire and emergency services needs of our growing township. As a result, we were able to offer health insurance to all our paid fire department staff for the first time. We were able to hire 2 new fire personnel, thus doubling our professional force. We currently are advertising for a new fire chief and hope to have that position filled by the second quarter of 2021. In 2020, the board approved a second emergency loan that will allow us to continue supporting the staff, health insurance benefits, and getting a 1977 fire and emergency service retirement fund established. In 2021, we plan to hire 2 additional paid fire personnel, as well as begin the process of transitioning from a township-led volunteer fire department to a fire district with a 75% paid fire department. Deputy Chief Jim Lewis wrote a 2020 report. Wabash Township Fire Department has had another busy year. We are at 1,174 runs this year compared to 1,316 runs in 2019. We doubled our paid staff and went on 24-hour shifts for better response time. We added a second quick response vehicle to help better serve our community. Our members have spent 1,500 hours of training to improve their skills and increase their knowledge to serve our community better and for the future. We have made tremendous strides in working agreements with our partners in West Lafayette, Battleground, and Purdue that will help all of us serve our communities better and faster. This is something that I have promoted for over 15 years and had me thinking it may never happen, but it will start early next year. We have faced the unusual task of responding to medical runs in the middle of a pandemic while protecting our staff from contracting the disease. We did this by developing a comprehensive plan to help our neighbors while still making sure we are safe and continue to do so until the pandemic is mitigated. We have one of the most diverse and dedicated departments in the country, and I am proud of all of them. As far as our cemeteries go, the township is responsible for the management and maintenance of 4 cemeteries: Sandridge, Burton, Hebron, and McCormick cemeteries. We are working on an agreement with Niches Land Trust at the Sandridge Cemetery, where they will help with maintenance of the property in exchange for protecting natural areas of the cemetery. They have been collecting seeds from the property for use in restoration at their Granville Sand Barrens property in western Tippecanoe County. We did hire a veteran-owned company to maintain and improve our other cemeteries. That's a little bit about the state of the township. And so we've had some discussion here about hiring staff. So it has been my understanding and my plan that the township would work toward a fire district for a long-term sustainable funding source, and that in 2021, we would do what we have done the previous 2 years, which is execute our third and final emergency loan to continue growing the paid staff of the fire department. And so as far as my questions to the board are, is that still your intention, and how you feel about the open positions that we have? So moving forward, what we have agreed upon is one full-time fire chief, and so we hired 2 people in 2020, and we intended to hire 2 more people in 2021. The fire department has come to me and asked us to amend that and to hire 3 people in 2021 because they would like to have 2 people per shift, and doing that would help them do that. So those positions are open right now, and we are looking to fill them.
So I'll begin by responding to your questions that you posed, trustee. I heard you throw out that we will continue moving toward a fire district. And then to kind of abridge it, you went on to say, is that still your intent? This is the first I'm hearing from you of your intention to move in that direction. We do have limited, very few options on the table for long-term sustainable funding, but this is certainly the first I'm hearing from you any conclusive intent to follow a particular path. And it's also the first I'm really hearing your request for my input on such a matter. I'm happy to have that discussion. This board has reviewed a lot of information. We have discussed holding meetings in particular to have folks with expertise talk about these matters, to field questions from folks in the community. So I certainly have my opinions on it. I am of the opinion that we should be seeking the input from those with expertise and those in our community. That's my stance. I'm glad to hear that's where you sit, that you are interested in moving toward a fire district. I'd be curious the makeup of that. Very much so. I think that's certainly, kind of an open question that we have to move with some expediency on. I would not say that it is anyone's direct intent to go down any one particular path at this point. Perhaps I'm just a prevailing optimist. However, I do believe that other doors might still be open if we don't continue to shut them.
Yeah, I know that I know from my personal experience here on the board, ideally we wouldn't be requesting a 3rd fire loan. We don't want to constantly be pushing the firefighters to the brink, in the sense that we don't have an established source of income when we could have already established one before, or we could have been making meaningful strides towards actually having either a district, a territory, other alternatives out there. I know that we have been really delayed in how we've done that. I think that our advisors, among other people, have really spoken about the need to do it earlier, but we are doing it a little bit later at the request of the trustee. I think that it's going to put us in a situation where we're really going to go for bust, in a sense, either if we don't do everything perfectly this year, then we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have to fire people that we're hiring. And I don't know that I speak for all of the board members, but my personal opinion is that if we don't have an established source of income for the future of the department, we shouldn't be putting future livelihoods of people at risk. That's a concern that I have. I think that hiring more firefighters when we don't know that the work is being put in to actually carry it through to fruition, becoming a district or a territory, and making sure essentially that their salaries are paid, that their health insurance is paid in the future, that we have retirement plans for them. I think all of those steps kind of predate, in a certain sense, or need to be taken in lockstep, if not a little bit before we hire more firefighters. That's at least how I view it, and trying to figure out how we act responsibly. I think that we can be fiscally responsible. We don't need to be holding back on what we can do, but we do need to act with due diligence as it comes to how we hire people, because it's people's livelihoods, not just a couple of number of what we expand 3 people. If we let them go, then what was really the impact on them?
I as well share those same concerns.
So Michelle and Angel, I know that you weren't here in the beginning of this process. So maybe it's worth taking just a minute to go back to the beginning. So when we first talked about putting together, we had several options in front of us, right?
I'll just interrupt. We understand where we were in the beginning. However, we are a different board. It requires constant communication to get there. You know, we can't.
We
sit
aren't.
there.
We aren't in it. I'm not in a different place. So yeah, nothing has changed as far as my plan for the township. So the original plan is still the one that we are attempting to execute.
Pardon me, Jennifer, pardon me. As the person who has been here as well, you know, in lockstep with you, there's not been clarity on a plan. In all fairness, you know, quite some time back, I proposed the idea I just proposed and still stand by, that we bring expertise to the table and bring constituents to the table to get their questions answered and to get ours. I don't think it's determined that we will go down a fire district or fire territory. I hear you insinuating that it has been our intent to go down one path. That is not the case. People have asked our intent, and we've been constantly studying the issue because it is a big issue to study. So in all fairness, as the person who has been here, please do not paint the past as if it is something that it was not. It was not clear which path we'll go down. It is still not clear. This board will be a part of that decision-making process as well. And we have not decided. So no, it is not clear.
Yeah, and prior to your termination, excuse me.
Well, I was the one that was speaking to begin with, so I'm just going to go ahead and complete my sentence, because what I'm trying to say to you is completely being misinterpreted.
I would excuse me, Ms. Tyson. I wanted to say that when the board was speaking with you recently, all the way maybe about a week before you fired the fire chief, in my view, unnecessarily, we spoke of creating a working group so that we could help address some of these things and that we could actually bring in expertise to the table. So I stand with with board member Brendan when we say that we have been asking for input, and we don't think that it's the responsibility or even the smart thing to do to just go ahead with one plan without having meaningful study, conversation about how we get there, what it requires, what the future looks like, what the plan is, what the funding stream is, how we impact that. If we're partnering with anybody else, what does that look like? How does that affect their taxes, the revenues, et cetera? Where does the funding come from for each of this particular aspects of it? And that's really been delayed. And as we continue to stand by the notion that we need to have firefighters on the table, I mean, we had spoken of having Chief Ward at that table because we really respect the chief and believe that he had a lot to contribute. Obviously, that's no longer possible given your actions, but you know, we continue to move forward in the direction that it is probably the smartest to have different stakeholders, including individuals that have come from smaller departments, that have gone through the process, to actually have the conversation of how we make a fire district happen or a fire territory happen, not just show up to a meeting and say it out loud, but actually get the work done.
So there's certainly a narrative at play here. So let me go back to the beginning. So when we came together as a board, what was presented to the board was the same plan that we have enacted today. So there are videos of this that are on the website. I know, Angel, you said that you didn't go back and watch them, but you're welcome to do so. So
Wow, that is such a personal dig, Jennifer. That's ridiculous. And again, as the person who was there, our plan was to talk about doing a fire loan. No, I can speak about the plan.
Okay. Yep.
Ray, would you like to interject?
Yeah, I would like everyone. Let's stay on topic here. You know, I think meetings starting to get a little long, and we got a long ways to go.
Yes. Okay, so back to the plan that was originally proposed to the board. So we intended always to have an emergency loan for 3 years. We also, as a group, discussed moving forward with hiring and providing benefits to those people. We were all in agreement with that. We had multiple avenues of establishing a long-term permanent funding solution. And those 3 things were a fire territory, a fire district, and potentially ambulance services and what have you. So we are limited by law in how to set up that long-term funding solution. And so nothing has been changed up until this date. And I am not quite sure what kind of delays that you are speaking of. We hired a company to provide us with all of these options and to present them to us, Reedy Financial. We have been working with them for quite some time to put those options into place. And so a fire territory would require us to have a working agreement with another department. And so that has been taken off of the table, as we do not have anyone at this time who is interested in pursuing that avenue with us. And so the fire district and the ambulance service are potentially our options for putting together long-term funding. So it was never the intention of the previous board members, to my understanding and my knowledge, to
have a different board. I understand that the board before said something different. I'm saying that this is a process that continues to be considered and that we have spoken about different things as well. Nobody's saying that a different board didn't have a different intention. There's obviously been a lot of rotation between who sits on the board. Many board members have left. There's been 6 board members. We're just having a conversation and saying what needs to continue happening. Anyway, I think that we can move on to the next point. Yeah.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing from you is that you do not believe that the township should move forward with retirement benefits or hiring additional fire personnel because you do not have confidence that a long-term funding solution will be created.
We have stated, and I think it's at least my opinion, that we need to be actually more on the confidence side that that funding will be available before we go ahead and hire people. We're talking about salaries, etc., livelihoods of individuals. If we do not have a decent understanding of how that's going to play out later on, then we're possibly making a mistake that will cost people's livelihoods. That's what we're speaking of. Not trying to say that we don't want to see a district or that we don't believe it can happen, saying that before we go hiring people, we need to make meaningful steps in that direction.
And folks, I'll just say this. I do think that it would be good to consider this in a more town hall-ish format. Again, I think that having open discussion is a great idea. And maybe Trustee Tyson, we can discuss times and ways and formats or what have you that might work toward that.
Yeah.
In the interim time, I know we have business on the table to consider. Trustee, I know you're giving your report. I would ask for anything else that we need to note. I know that we had, wanted to kind of maybe look at and just ask on something positive how the interview process is going for chiefs, if that's moving along, what that looks like, perhaps your feelings on it. And then if we can move to the resolution, I think that would be great. Those are just my personal thoughts. But Trustee, are there other things of note that we can move to, Chair, if you're accepting?
I'm not clear what you just asked me. So go ahead, Ray.
So thank you, Mr. Betts. I agree with you. We should, I don't think anything's going to get resolved today. I think these are great questions. I think the question before the board and trustee right now is if there's any other items within this topic area to discuss, and then moving on to the resolution. So Trustee Tyson, is there anything more to discuss in this area?
No,
Okay. And then Board Chair, if you want to resume the agenda.
Yeah, and just for, we'll move forward onto the review of township. I think, did you already cover that, the review of township assistance provided in 2020? Was that what the previous statement was? Just making sure that I don't skip anything.
yep, that was a summary of what we did in 2020 for all.
All right, so before we jump through everything, just a quick mention as well. For the topics of the fire district, etc. It's the intention of the board to hold 2 meetings, actually, because of the movement of this meeting a little bit later, that pushed back to February 16th. That board meeting is intended to cover the initial discussions of the feasibility study. So that's part of what the process that we would want to see going forward, and trying to figure out if we can do that, etc., as to how we craft the actual future of the fire department and whatnot, and what we need to do to go forward. In addition to that, let's see here, we covered through all of that. So the moving on to the annual report, what would be the process, Ray, for presentation? I know that it's not explicitly covered for, like, in the agenda, how it would be covered. I'll defer to you.
Yeah, so typically with some of the other boards I work with, after the trustee report regarding what had occurred in 2020 and the plan for 2021, there would be a discussion or questions with regard to the annual report, and then there would be a motion and second to either accept it in part, or to table it for later.
Okay. I know that, and this was a concern that Ms. Roth expressed earlier. There's been a concern that I've actually had for a little while. I've gone through and I've called ITA to figure out how does that usually happen, the reporting, specifically of non-township assistance, which is what it's covered. Let me pull up over here. Just, I want to cite the numbers accurately. I have a little bit too many pages open on my computer. But if you give me a second here. So the concern that I have is, generally speaking, when it comes to township assistance, it's our understanding, right, that you would go through the process, right? Obviously, there's stricter reporting for actual assistance provided by the township, not for referrals. But when it comes to the assistance that the referrals resulted in, the process generally consists of going through, following up, and actually reaching out to the individuals, making sure assistance was provided. A big concern there, because I mean, working with social services or whatnot, or assistance resources, I know that oftentimes referrals don't lead to actual resources being dispersed. I guess we can start ahead and ask specifically as to that component of that, what verification was done to see what amounts of assistance was provided by the different organizations that you referred individuals to. Is there any like additional supplemental documents, if you will, that like basically like, you know, state where that estimate comes from?
So the way that we did the estimates for the COVID response was to contact those agencies and try to get information from them. They didn't have it broken down by township. And so, for example, the state rental assistance program is the only program that gave us actual numbers, and they gave it to us for the entire zip code of 47906. And so we did a specific number. So obviously that information, the data that we don't have access to who they helped and who they didn't. And so we took the number of phone calls that we referred specifically to that entity for that specific service. So for example, I think it was 44. I could pull it up, but it doesn't any number. Just say it's 40 referrals. And then we took the total number of assistants to our area, like 47906, divided out by the households that they said that they helped. That estimate was $2,000 per household for the state rental assistance program. And so in order to try and lowball that, so to speak, to make sure that it was not an overestimate, I just took that by 50%. So we used $1,000 versus the $2,000 per household that was their average. Because we don't know, and we have no way of knowing who received assistance, how many of those referrals actually went through the program.
So sorry, I interrupted.
So people who actually, so we don't even have any understanding of who actually completed all of their information. So when we first signed up to help execute that program, the state rental assistance program, we were the only township in Tippecanoe County who participated in helping them execute that program. And when we signed up to do that, we thought that we would be helping our own people. So we would refer people to the state rental assistance program. They would go through the application online. We would be assigned those people in the township, and then we would approve or deny their assistance. Unfortunately, they said that the way that their data was constructed, that they could not provide us the people in our township. And so we were helping people from all over the state, from wherever. They just assigned us cases, and we worked on those. We asked them multiple times, or informed them multiple times that we could serve more families. But I think they had the Indiana Township Association had helped get townships being a part of that, and they had plenty of help, and so they were able to get through all those applications. So that's kind of how we worked with the state rental assistance program. For Area 4, they received state and federal dollars from for COVID for utility assistance. The state housing program has shut down now. They're not taking applications anymore. They don't have any more funds. So that is no longer an option for us. Area 4 still has funding and will have, they say, through May. So we'll be continuing to help people utilize that resource. And then also Bauer received funds, and they can help families with children in the household. So when people contact us, we find out what their situation is, and if it's appropriate, we send them over to Bauer because they also received funds. The board was presented that information in 2020 when Kara Boyles came and spoke at the board meeting. That's Kara was part of Bauer Community, and she talked about that program and the others. And then the United Way put together a hotline so that people could contact the hotline and get, depending on their situation and where they are, get connected to multiple resources. And so that's one of the questions. Again, so the way that the board would communicate with me on how they think that township assistance should be distributed in the township is through the guidelines, right? So the township assistance guidelines can be amended and approved by the board. And there are some things obviously that can't be changed. It's a state application, it's a state process, things like that. There's the minutia in there that we don't really have control over. But we have a limited amount of funds, and it is, we are not allowed to, it is my understanding, Ray can speak to this as well, but it is my understanding of statute and law that we are not allowed to deny assistance due to a lack of funds. And so, you know, we have a set number of funds for this year. It's like, let's just call it 30,000 just to make the conversation easy. It doesn't matter. We can look at it, but let's say it's $30,000. And so what has been done in the past in Wabash Township, is that has been divided out by the number of households that we believe are going to ask for assistance, and then there's been a maximum benefit to each household. Prior to myself taking on the role of trustee, the amount was actually stated, outlined.
Can we move on a little bit quicker? Sorry, it's going a little bit longer than I think the question was meant to go. I think that it still hasn't answered the primary component of the question, which was, you know, if we got the
estimate.
So we have a process like other townships have done it, is to call the individuals that you have been helping, which I understand that we have a list of the individuals. Has there been follow-up to see whether they received assistance or not that would allow us to actually get information about how much money did they receive from the referrals that we provided? Because generally speaking, that's how it's done. You know, oftentimes people will apply, they won't get it.
So that's not my understanding of how it's done. That's not what the Indiana Township Association informed me about how the townships do the referral basis. And so we do try and follow up with people. We ask them, mostly during our process, we ask them to contact us if their need has not been met. So we are most interested in individuals who, for one reason or another, could not meet their need. So either they didn't have a computer, they couldn't fill out the application. So we are not, we are certainly do not have the time to contact people multiple times. We try to follow up with them a few times to get that information, but we don't continue to follow up with those people repeatedly over time to try to find out.
It's my understanding that we had 108 applications. Is that correct? Something along those number of people that reached out asking for assistance. What was the number?
They weren't applications. Those are requests for assistance. Correct. They contacted us and said, we're in need and here's our need. And then we help direct them to the sources that could help them meet that need.
And generally speaking, you know, if you had 100 people, and that would require maybe, let's say, a call is about 20 minutes in my experience. So we're talking about spending 1 hour times, so 30 hours. So like maybe a couple of weeks times of like expended, you know, resources.
That was never even our intent. So we never.
And so like my question there still is, how do we know that that number is accurate? Because like, honestly, it looks like it's coming out of nowhere, because we don't know of those people that went to you, that you
so we know
how many of those were accepted, how many of those were accepted, how many of those received assistance, how many of those, like that amount. Because I know for a fact that plenty of organizations locally require you to go through the application process at your local trustee's office for them to actually get any, like you have to get a letter saying that you were denied for them to be considered for assistance.
None of these assistance programs were requiring that. So
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, specifically, I mean, we were in contact with these resources repeatedly over the process, right? So we met with the United Way multiple times. There were phone calls that were happening. No one was requiring anything from us to assist people through these programs. Yes, it's an estimate, and it's my understanding. It is my understanding that we did the exact process that is recommended to townships across the state of Indiana. Ray, do you have any understanding of the referral process or how estimates are supposed to be completed?
So not in relation to what has gone on over the past year. Obviously, this has been an outlier of a year. And so there were a lot of programs established and things were done multiple different ways. I think just getting back to the question of the annual report, which is what we're talking about, I think we should focus on assistance that the township actually provided rather than the referral portion of things. I think these are all valid questions, and obviously there are questions that should be asked, but in relation to what we're doing today, this is related to assistance actually provided by the township as well as funds actually spent by the township. So I'd recommend that we move into that discussion.
And speaking of those specific requests for assistance that were provided, it's my understanding in conversation with the people that were in the office at the time that of the money that we provided, I forget exactly what the number is, but roughly half of what we provided was actually a request for assistance from the previous year that wasn't actually apportioned at that time.
I don't understand what you're saying.
There was a request for assistance in the range of $2,000+, or not request for assistance, but provided assistance that went to Brendan. Do you remember what the name of the bank was or whatnot on the document?
I don't remember in particular. However, Jennifer, what he's referencing, of course, we gave out a given amount of money in 2020. Let's call it roughly 4,200. Yeah, right. In that range. So we gave out a particular amount of money. And then I think, the curious reference is that part of it was requested in a previous year and then dispersed actually in 2020. That's kind of the event on whole is referencing. So someone asked in 2019 for aid. Aid was reviewed over a period of time and then ultimately dispersed in the fiscal year 2020. That's the reference. And that was more than or roughly half the aid dispersed in the calendar year 2020. I think that's what Chair Onhold is referencing.
Yeah, the amount, the number of people that were assisted would be the number of people where it was paid out.
Yeah, but to make it clear, there was a payment that should have gone out in 2019, but was mistakenly made the wrong to either the wrong address or whatnot, but it wasn't done at the time when the request was made.
That is not my understanding. No. So we make the payments with the information that we had, and they claimed that payment got lost, and so we reissued a check. I'm not sure if that's the same incident you're referring to, but it's possible.
So and it's my understanding that payment appears being in 2020, even though the request for assistance came through in 2019.
Common.
The original money was sent. The original money was sent. The check was originally sent in 2019. For whatever reason, it didn't arrive. It actually was sent out and received in 2020, and it's included in the 2020 township assistance. Is that correct?
It's possible. Yeah, absolutely. So, township business does not just, stop December 31st, 2019. So if there was if there was an ongoing case and the payment was made in 2020, the numbers for that household would be referenced in 2020. Yes.
Yeah, and in such a situation, the reason why it's important is because we apportioned $30,000 after the process through. Well, I didn't apportion it. Brendan and the board at the time passed the budget, and I think that for 2020, it was done in 2019 for 2020, correct? And we received about $18,790 in the end that were designated towards township assistance. But the thing is, we had about 4,200 or so actual money that went out of the township, of which over 2,000 was actually, from the previous year. It just happened to be dispersed that year after a mistake by either the township or the location over there. So we're talking.
And how is that relevant to what you're asking me? I'm still not clear on what you're asking me.
Well, so the question is, of the request that we received in 2020, how much assistance went out? Because I understand, it's a continuous thing, but it
Oh,
seems
yeah,
that it's
no,
misleading.
that's not the way the annual report is completed. So it's the number of paid out, and that is the number of households.
I understand that it appears in the report. I'm not saying that that number is incorrect. I just want clarification on whether that was the case.
I
And we
don't know.
actually
So I'm saying I
provided-
don't know. What I have is the annual report. I'm saying that could potentially be the case. Sure.
And Ray, what would be the process for figuring out how that request, like whether for the ledgers, I guess, which we don't have access to completely because they haven't been provided.
Well,
What would be
that's
the process for seeking that documentation to understand township assistance before we approve the annual report?
Well, the ledger wouldn't tell you that, but the annual report does. It breaks
Well,
down. So
the ledgers allow us to add up the numbers and make sure that that's what
well, not
was
not
offered in-
necessarily. Not
Well, they
necessarily.
should. They
So-
should. Like the ledgers should match up to like what the.
Are you
annual-
gonna let me? Are you gonna let me talk to you, or are you gonna keep interrupting me? So on the bank statement, there's a check number and an amount, but in the annual report, it breaks down by fund. So you can see specifically by fund, payee, and amount.
If I might be mistaken, but I think that like it didn't have the specific date as to when each payment was made, but not it has the. I just want to make sure that we can see if that payment was actually from the previous year, that there was, just so that we understand for the purpose of this board to know how much we actually provided in assistance for people that applied in 2020. Because people have asked and whatnot, and we've never really gotten a clear answer as to where how many people got it and how much assistance we provided from our money, because none of these other resources that were created were intended to replace what township assistance does. As you're aware, the reason why we have extra programs was because there was extra need, and I think that this board did not intend for the money to go unused simply because there were other resources. I think that I know that other resources drive.
That is not my. That was not
for example,
of your direction to me, right? So there are two ways that the board can communicate to me. One is through the township guidelines, and then I had a conversation.
And the township guidelines, as I understand it, do not limit the amount that you have provided. I know that there's been the number 250 thrown out, but my understanding is that it doesn't currently actually say $250. So individuals that came and asked for help, could have received more than that. And I know that it's been.
Why would they receive more than they asked for? That's the part that I'm not connecting with what you're saying. So if they contacted us with a need, if someone contacts us and they have a need for township assistance, and that need is met, we would not, there would not be an excess provided from the township.
None of us is claiming that there needs to be an excess.
I don't know what you're claiming. I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying,
so
Jennifer,
yeah.
We're saying that if there was more need, we would expect to see more requests for probably not necessarily more amounts, but more requests. And we have seen that even less funds were distributed. So what went wrong?
Nothing.
So we got less. So we got the same amount of requests, but we distributed $2,000 from our own funds.
No, I'm saying the amount of requests were documented. They're documented in the annual report. They're documented in all the annual reports. So you can go back and you can look at the year of how many requests we made. Absolutely nothing went wrong in the township. So again, I executed a plan that was put forth to me by the board. I had conversations. I'm sorry, are you confused?
No, I
have received no communication from you whatsoever that you did not intend for the township to use federal and state funds available in the pandemic. I don't know why you would do that.
Well, that's not the case. Yeah, I hear you, Jennifer, for sure, but that's not the case. I think on whole is making an assertion that we had a certain cap on how much we wanted to help per household. Jennifer, is that the case that we had a certain cap? I think it might be in the guidelines, but perhaps just in the office, was it a certain amount per household you wanted to help, or like wanted to cap that at, that we wanted to?
So again, this goes back to my earlier statement. So we have a specific set amount per year.
No, I understand. But I'm just wondering if you know.
No, this is specific to what you're asking me. We have a set amount that we have to provide township assistance. So each year, what we do is we take the number of assistance applications that we expect and divide that by
the amount. Precisely, exactly. You do division and you have to invert what you said. You take the whole amount and you divide by the number you expect. No, I hear you, Jennifer. It's not about that. I'm driving to a point. On hold, chair, please stop. Guys, please.
One at a time.
No,
I still have not answered your question. I'm trying to answer your question.
No, I understand, but I'm really just, you understand the point. We're trying to drive towards his specific concern and what you're trying to express to us.
No, I don't understand your point. This is how
No, you understand what I'm saying to you, that there's a cap on the households, right? My point is simply that if there's a count, right? Like we have an expectation based on that division. Absolutely. Now, it is also within the trustees' purview to perhaps exceed that cap per case, right? If there's a case that comes up and you guys are working through some stuff and they say, okay, well, beyond a certain amount, maybe you guys work out an agreement where they work it off or pay it back or what have you. That sort of thing could occur.
We do not do that.
The trustee can make exceptions. Sure, you're right. Absolutely.
Not without the board. No, there's a program.
Without a program. Correct. Yes, ma'am. I'm fully aware, trustee. Thank you. And I think that the folks are just trying to hang on here because there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of stuff happening. So I think he's just saying that in the pandemic, if we see that we're not helping as many folks as perhaps we expect to, perhaps we're not seeing the caseload coming in that we would need us. We're able to participate with other programs and help them and act as that clearinghouse. So folks can come and we defer them to Bauer, we refer them over to someone else, Area 4 or what have you, that might be able to help. Right. Now, on hold Valentine, the concern from the board as an aggregate as a whole is simply that, one, seeing that we had not that much coming out of our own funds, could actively pursue a way to disperse those funds amongst the community in the midst of an extreme event such as, an economic crisis or a pandemic. He's expressing that concern. That's it. We understand the process to devise that number, at least I do. I understand that there's certainly guidelines. I also know that we can direct you via resolution, or we can have these discussions, one-on-one or in a public setting where folks can kind of hear us hash things out. And I'll be honest with you, all that's okay. But he's driving at the fact that there was a concern from this board and the community as a whole that we didn't actively pursue, essentially, spending those dollars that were earmarked and meant to help folks. That's all. Does that concern make sense?
So you have a concern that we did not spend township dollars when COVID money was available.
We think that it's not either or. And I won't choose to say the term we, that's inaccurate, that's wrong. It's certainly not either or. It's just looking at, from my perspective, using all the tools on the table. So certainly bolstering and working with food finders and what have you in the community, but also looking at ways that we can actively make sure that we're helping in ways that we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean, in other townships, when we don't provide township assistance, or when something happens and we don't end up needing to provide township assistance in a moment when there is a lot of need, and knowing, I believe, we all recognize that there was a lot of need in the community and that our tax dollars could have been effectively used. We could have also had a conversation, which was not had because we did not realize that assistance was not being provided, that we could have moved money to other sources throughout a process. It would require a process for because other townships have also used money that moved money to be able to provide.
Okay, let's go back to
anyway, from rainy day and township assistance funds, clearly, by the way, from rainy day and township assistance, clearly.
The concern
but let's get back to the annual report, please.
And going back to the annual report, EA7 statistical summary was saying that there were 124 total number of requests for township assistance. The one that you provided. and it said that number of recipients, total number of recipients of township assistance was 6.
Okay.
Do you understand how that's a
So
concern?
my plan for the township assistance dollars, I went to Michelle Whitebrock, the board president at the time, and told her of my concerns for the 2020 pandemic. And she directed me to utilize state and federal funds for the pandemic. And I held over, we met, all the need was met. I know of no one in the township that had a need that was not met. I have no one, not one person. We asked people to come back to us if their need was not met with those COVID funds. Considering the fact that $400,000 went out from the Indiana State Rental Assistance Program to the people in our zip code, I fully believe that that need was met. We were on the call with the United Way, and they were going to direct people to us if they needed to. Area 4 had our information. So we know of no one that's need was not met in the pandemic that would qualify for our program.
Right, but
I have to say,
but you would certainly recognize though that just
Do a
because we,
clown
the
show.
township, were unaware.
Let's go back to where we are in
The annual report.
2021. So in
Right.
2020, these funds were not lost that we did not spend. There is an eviction moratorium potentially coming, and now there are COVID programs that are running out. So the funds that were in the township assistance program from 2020 have rolled over to 2021. There is no loss here to the township. So these
Trustee
funds are not
Tyson.
moved out of that fund. We still have the ability to help people.
Trustee
So I've been
Tyson.
in Angel, I really need you to let me ask my question. I have a question to the
Okay,
board.
ask the
I have a proposal for you. If you want to make a direction to the township regarding what you think should be happening, put it in the guidelines and send it over to my office. It's very simple.
What I was trying to say was another concern on this particular question, and like just going back to what you were speaking of, as eviction moratorium, and all of the funding, especially like stopgap funding meant to prevent people from getting evicted, etc. At the end of it, you still have to pay back for previous month's rent. So what happens to the assistance? We could have used money to make sure that people were still up to date on their rent, and instead, whenever the eviction moratorium runs
We
out,
don't
we
have it
have
in
to
the-
pay
but
back.
we denied assistance on Hell. You're missing the whole point of my statement.
So I think,
No one came to the township and asked us to
I
apply for assistance that was
Yes.
denied.
I personally interacted in my workplace with people that went up to the trustee's office.
Okay,
Had
so you know
went
how to
through
deal
the
with that?
process.
Let me-
Excuse me.
Let me
Excuse me.
break down
We
for
went
you
through the
how to deal
process.
with that.
We
Okay,
went through the
just go
process
ahead
of
and
going
continue.
through assistance and asking for it. They were told that they couldn't get it, or they were directed to other funds. The other funds didn't materialize. And I have to tell you that I unfortunately sent them back to the township, and they also didn't get the aid again.
Okay, but again, there is a process for that. I have office staff. So if you have someone that you know of that had an interaction with my staff that didn't get them the assistance that they need, you have to communicate that to me, and I have to do an investigation, and I'll find out what happened, and we'll make adjustments in the office. So Ray, did you want to move on to the annual report section of this meeting, because it's 7:30 and I'm sure people want to get done with this meeting.
yeah, I mean, I think these are, these are good questions, and we can continue to ask them. In relation to the annual report, though, we need to focus. If you have questions in relation to the annual report in particular, I think that would be helpful. Angel, I think, thank you for your comment of a couple of people that about. Obviously, those things can be looked at closer. But in relation to passing the resolution or not passing the resolution, I don't know that those particular cases would impact that.
Well, and just to corroborate, Ray, we were provided with the list of stuff for the report, and it appeared, this information appeared on the report, like the township assisted, especially the non-township, the ones from referrals. And, you know, what would be the process for potentially excluding that from the annual report so that we could hold a vote that we can feel confident that, you know, because I know that we have to approve it in full or in part.
Yeah.
And I think
So,
yeah.
I'm sorry, and this may be me being dense, but I'm not understanding what your question is.
Like what would be the process for us to like potentially like approve a report that does not include this component or does not approve that part of the report?
And so which part in particular are you?
I have to pull it up, but like I forget exactly where it's stated within the report, but it includes the like non-township assistance. I want to make sure that that's not like part of what we're proving, because I personally cannot sign my name on something that I don't trust is accurate. And it's the component of non-township assistance that's part of the report. I know it's not audited, but it's part of the report.
Okay, so that particular number, as far as the dollar amount of non-township assistance provided in the
Correct.
2020 year.
Correct.
So you can move to amend the resolution and exclude that particular number if that's the concern, and then pass the rest of it.
Yeah. All right. Brendan, Michelle, do either of you have? I know I've spoken a lot. Do either of you have something else to add?
I don't have anything further.
I'll just double check, just so that we understand, you know, what the process was for this as well. Like, just so that we know if anything ever came up of this report or whatnot, because like I have to admit and be honest that like frankly, like as an individual, I'm cognizant of the fact that I don't want my name on something that later turns out to be wrong. Just for the purpose of the record, who participated in the creation of this report, if possible, like what individuals were involved in the creating of the report, in case that we ever had to go back an amendment, God forbid, or whatnot.
Myself and Trisha, the office manager.
Okay. Brendan, I know you're on unmuted. Do you have something to say?
I appreciate the space. Not at this juncture, no.
That was my biggest concern. I understand. I personally have a lot of confidence in your office staffer, Jennifer, and I tend to, you know, be what like, despite our disagreement.
Or you don't.
I said I do. I said I do. I have a lot of confidence in your office staffer, and like, despite the fact that I have strong disagreements with you, and I obviously, and we can talk about it all day here or in other settings about our disagreements, I tend to agree that we can, that most of the information there, you know, I trust that it's accurate, but I'm really concerned about that number. So I would move that we amend the resolution to exclude approval of that. I don't know what the language would need to be, Ray, specifically. Maybe you could provide some guidance on that.
Yeah, I can add some language to the resolution. I think that you guys were provided in a copy of the proposed resolution. So what you would do is you would move and second adoption of the resolution, and then move to amend it, and then vote on that amendment, and then vote on the amended resolution.
Might I speak and have a moment here? I do want to note for folks, I know there's a lot of skepticism, concern, and whatnot. I understand that there's obviously a lot here in this meeting and a lot in the media or what have you. All that aside, this is a very relatively basic vote. You know, we have our questions in terms of, you know, the estimate, but note that the trustee, it's incumbent upon her to provide an estimate. That provides quite a bit of leeway, folks. Additionally, it would appear, and I would love to see receipts, but it would appear that she used a standardized way of achieving that data. With that in mind, this is an important step. This is part of our fiduciary responsibility as a board. I understand why folks have their skepticism and concerns. I really do. Obviously, I have my own, but that's what government is about in terms of we're a check. We have limited power as a board, but we are a check, and we do have a fiduciary responsibility. With all that in mind, she has answered our questions. I would invite the trustee to come to our regularly scheduled meetings. I don't think that's a bad thing, especially the town hall style meetings. We're fairly flexible folks, and your input is not only relevant, it's vital. You have to input into that process. I certainly think so, and we also think other stakeholders are vital in that process, but you are too. So I would certainly encourage you. The invitation will be extended as long as you're our trustee. You serve in that capacity, and we have expectations, and we butt heads, obviously, as is evident this evening. But frankly, yeah, this is a basic part of our jobs, and we have huge things to mount. Folks heard us discuss tonight about fire districts and territory. That's a huge consideration that needs to be considered yesterday, but we will mount it now, assuming that we have parties willing to. So again, trustee, I would invite you and encourage you to please come to our regularly scheduled meetings to continue to address what you might perceive as misperceptions. Please come and answer those questions. Please do. And please come to our town halls and play a role and understand where people want to go in this community. Don't just decide it's a district, or if you have, then come and present that and defend it, please. But since we have you here this evening, since you did take this time to come and explain to us the annual report, if you're open to coming to those future meetings, if you can commit to that especially, I'm happy to pass this, frankly. I don't have a concern. We can amend it. I'm open to that. But with an estimate being quite broad, fairly vague, with that being still an issue of concern, let's dig into it. And if you're committed to that, Trustee Tysing, if you're committed to that process, then let's do it. Let's pass this report and get on to real work.
I would second that. I think, if we had part of the really what everybody's seen, this bubbling up of frustration.
Chair, pardon me, not to be rude. Pardon me, Chair, not to be rude, but my question was for Jennifer Tysing, our trustee. Could you please commit to coming to our town hall style meetings and to our continued meetings so we can continue to work this out and hash this out and do the work?
So I think it is irresponsible of us to hold unnecessary meetings, as we agreed via email that we would have counsel at our meeting. And I'm sure at some point this evening, we will get to how much we are paying for legal counsel. I know people are going to be very interested in how we spend our dollars and are responsible.
That's a great point, Tysing. That's a great point, Trustee Tysing. But is that a yes or no? I mean, I hear you. We've discussed that as a board, the concern about spending the money on financial advisors as well as legal counsel. This is a pivotal decision. Could you please commit to coming to our upcoming meetings?
Are you ready for me to talk now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I do not think that it is responsible that we use township funds.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. You don't want me to talk.
Well, thank you, Trustee Tysing. I'm going to go ahead and move that we pass this resolution.
Yeah. We can go ahead and that. We can talk later about what that looks like.
We haven't even talked about the report. So you're approving all the rest of the report without discussion.
I mean, at least I personally have reviewed the report, and that was my issue of concern of all of that area. There were a couple of items that were interesting to me, but I went through and reviewed the report, and I thought that it was in order. That's my view. Is there any specific area that the other members would like to hear more information on?
Not at this time.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mr. Betts. Is there a second?
There's a second.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I think there's a motion and a second. So if you want to call for a vote to accept the
Yeah.
resolution.
So I call for a vote to accept the resolution. Let's hear the ayes. Brendan, I'll do roll call. Brendan,
Aye.
Michelle,
I'll abstain.
Sorry, was that an abstention?
Yes.
Okay. Uh-oh, looks like, did we lose Angel?
He's frozen on my screen.
Mine as well.
It's officially the worst time to get frozen on the screen.
Very Zoom.
Oh, there he is.
Very
There we
Zoom.
go.
Hey, Chair, on hold, we lost you for a second there. We were
yeah,
asking for your vote.
for whatever reason I could hear you, but I couldn't talk. I know that it's in the middle of the vote, but just a procedural question. What would be if 2 people abstain and 1 person votes? Would that be enough to pass or no?
No, it would not.
Well, given the situation, I'll vote aye, but I'll make it publicly clear that I have a lot of concerns about the specifically as township assistance. I think that that's a big area, but obviously we've discussed it all night. So yeah.
This board has made our concerns clear. We'll continue to. Like I said, I understand that the trustee finds it to be irresponsible, but the invitation stands. Please come, let's open dialogue. It does look like the motion carries for the resolution.
Correct.
Is there an amendment proposal, Chair?
No, I think since we already passed the resolution, we can't amend it.
Yeah.
That would have had to happen before. It's an estimate. It won't go on the, it's not something that can be audited. Speaking of policy changes, since it hasn't been made, there wasn't a specific policy, we can make it in writing how we move forward and count referrals and how we actually tally those amounts so that it's an information that can, reflects what the township would expect from the board and the trustee.
Counsel, my question for you would be at this juncture, especially with your past experience and firsthand in township government, is the power to resolve from the board in direction, whereas to say the board so resolves that the trustee, whatever, puts together this information or distributes aid this way. What is the limit on that power for the power to resolve, for the board to resolve, which is simply a resolution, a statement, but a statement of direction? I've heard of this, but I just want to ask counsel clearly, what are your perceptions of that limitation? How is that typically used in your experience?
Yeah, so so you can ask for copies of documents and examine the books and records, and do that in conjunction with either adopting the annual budget or the annual report. As far as directing specific uses of funds, there are pretty strong limitations on that, other than through the township assistance guidelines, which you would vote on and adopt. To the extent that you'd like to take a look at those and propose changes, that's something to do. Something that we've done in one of the other townships I represent is put together a rental assistance program that's township based, that uses funds that are carryover from a previous year. In particular here, it seems like there may be some funds that are able to be carried over. And so what we've done is set up a fund that would go into place when the eviction moratorium ends, because there's going to be a specific need for that at that point in time, potentially. So you could create a resolution creating a fund for that sort of a program. But as far as execution of the fund, that's in the hands of the trustee.
Thank you very much for explaining that for both the board and for the public, right?
Absolutely.
And following up on that question, since you do have experience on that front and it might guide future action by the board, would we be able to like have rental assistance or a program like that cover back rent in the sense, I know like when it comes to township assistance itself, you're limited to current month's rent is my understanding and interacting with townships all over, the region. Is there a way to set it up so that you can provide assistance for past months in the case of individuals that could have been that were on hold on the eviction but weren't receiving assistance or didn't seek assistance at the time and then have to pay back rent? Is there a way to set that up, or would that require further studying?
Yeah, that I would defer to researching that issue. I couldn't give you a definitive answer on that as we sit on the call today.
Okay, that works. And would you be able to provide that by next meeting possibly?
When's the next meeting?
We're going to have, we were hoping to have a meeting on the 16th to cover the initial report. And it wasn't intended to be decision-making specifically. It was just to cover, have a conversation. There wasn't a plan to have recorded votes or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think we could hold off on recorded vote because part of what if necessary. Yeah.
Okay. So I hate to put this out there, but I'm going to be out of town.
Okay.
so if I could have a little bit more time, that would be extremely helpful.
That's fine. Would it be a possibility that we could get that information ahead of over email or whatnot ahead of the March 16th regular meeting so that we could possibly move towards creating something like that or whatnot?
Yeah. I will make a note of that.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, going to the part that the most interesting and exciting and combative part of the meeting for sure. Like when it comes to covering the cost of legal counsel, I know that we, as a township, we didn't have really a lot of money allocated for the legal component of how we, of counsel itself. So I know that you mentioned earlier about moving to a monthly rate or whatnot. Has there been any number or anything like that, any estimate of what that would be specifically?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So currently, I am on an hourly fee basis. That's and then what I had proposed is going to a flat fee model for 20 hours per month of assistance. And then anything over that 20 hours, I would bill at a reduced hourly rate. What I had proposed was a flat fee of $4,500 a month for those 20 hours. And then after that point in time, the hours would be billed at $300 an hour, which is pretty discounted from my standard hourly rate.
So something along the rate of, for this year, $45,000.
Yeah, I guess there are 10 months left.
Yeah.
That's why I became a lawyer, is I'm not a math person.
Well, I'll do all the math for you. I studied mechanical engineering, so.
Oh, there you go.
All right, so that allows us to speak of, be able to figure that out. I think that we would require moving funds, just so that you're aware, since I believe that the component of the budget that went towards additional, I forget what the exact phrasing of it is, but the part where you
professional services.
Professional services, thank you for that. It was in the range of $26,000, if I remember correctly, and most of it was intended to go towards financial services. So we'll have to figure out how we cover that. But yeah. So that, I think that will be a subject for further discussion. I don't know if any of the board members want to comment or anything at the moment. I don't know that there's much to, but
definitely not at this point, no.
Yeah, so we can continue to discuss over email as we have on communications and try to figure out how we cover that, since it is a really big expenditure for the township. Yeah. Going back to my previous thing, I know that it's been covered in the previously, and I referred to it repeatedly over the course of the night. I wanted to like explain specifically what we're asking for. Hopefully we don't need a specific resolution to resolve to get the information. I think that in asking for it, ideally that would lead to the documents being submitted or whatnot. We had spoken about a couple of documents, and we'd requested them a couple of times over the course of the last year or so, or at least the last 7 months that I've been on the board, for some of the like monthly information, specifically like assistance requests. You know, no personal information specifically about the individuals or anything like that, but the number of assistance requests, number of assistance requests provided, how much was dispersed from that fund. Similarly, like the status at the end of the month of each specific like fund, etc. And same as the monthly ledgers. And then I think we asked on a quarterly basis because it's a little bit harder to compile that information, or at least we think it is, information regarding like the number of runs, etc., that the fire department was covering. So that would be just to give an overview and just cover quickly what we had included in agenda item number 9, which was like the documentation that we wanted to provide. I wanted to put it out there specifically what we wanted to ask for. And then moving on to future meeting dates for 2021. We do have a regularly scheduled meeting next week. Today we had scheduled meetings on the third Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. And what we're hoping is that this upcoming meeting, we were provided the feasibility study today actually, and we'll be reading it over and being able to have some conversation as to if we figure out what the direction of it is. So the next 2 meetings, we hope to focus on those specifically, but obviously there's other issues to discuss, but that'll be the bulk of the meeting, trying to figure out the feasibility study, as well as what budget considerations that creates for how do we budget in this upcoming year, 2021 for the budget for 2022. How does that impact the budget? What considerations? Because it's going to be a big lift to get all of that done for 2022. Want to make sure to cover that. That was the second to last agenda item. So for the last agenda item, it's just adjournment, which everybody is anxiously waiting for. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Hearing no opposition, this meeting stands adjourned at 7:54 p.m. And we'll see you next week for a shorter meeting covering the feasibility study.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for attending.
Thanks, guys.